Okay, let's be real. Euphoria is no longer a show about high school drama. Forget the glittery eye makeup and the scandalous hookups. It's been almost 5 years. Hell, I was in my 20s when this show first aired, and now I'm in my 30s, so let's face it, we've all grown up, and so have they, and it's time for them to face the reality and face the consequences of their actions. After years of radio silence, behind the scenes controversies, and heartbreaking loss of the cast members, we are officially back. Welcome to my breakdown of Euphoria Season 3, Episode 1. We're catching up with the crew, seeing who's evolved, who's spiraled, and asking the big question, have they changed for the better, or are they just finding new ways to ruin their lives? Let's talk about Rue, Lexi, Jules, Cassie, Nate, and of course Maddie, and break down the scenes, themes, and possible foreshadowing and much more. Full spoilers ahead. We open in Mexico's largest state, Chihuahua, with Rue, who hasn't been up to much good since high school, as we find her deep in the mud, quite literally. She gets some help by the locals getting out of the mud, as we'll later see that this is a part of a drug run for Lori. Recklessly driving, she makes it to the border, completes a transaction, and she attempts into driving Lori's truck over the gate, but she gets stuck and has to leave Lori's truck behind, almost seriously injuring herself in the process. Now, looking at this image of Rue being caught between this gate to me is a representation of where Rue's life is at the moment. Trying to balance back and forth between life and death, always one step closer to making a bad decision, caught behind being stuck and moving forward with her reckless ways. Now in Aladose, Texas, Rue stumbles into a barn where a little girl offers her the best fucking milk she's ever had thanks to a cow named Dahlia. Now Rue breaks bread with this super Christian family by the name of the Millers, and they're under the belief that Rue is doing the Lord's work by exposing the evils going on across the border for her college newspaper, as we watch them say goodbye to her and wishing her will on her trip. Now the family's daughter Daisy drives Rue to her Greyhound and shares with her how she's never been on the internet before and how she desires to experience what that life is like, as Rue tells her that she's basically not missing anything and she wishes she can switch lives with her, as she drops Rue off and she eventually makes her way to California. Now, if you listen closely to the score from this more cheerful, hopeful music, but as soon as Rue crosses over to California, we see, number one, a snake crawling from a rock, which is symbolism for a little bit later for the forbidden fruit, and you can see that the score begins to sound more sinister and more dark, as these are just signs towards danger for Rue. Now back at Lori's, we get a look at Rue's reality. The opening job we saw at the beginning was Rue just completing what was simply a minor drop in an endless bucket. With 46 months of 20% interest, Rue's debt has ballooned to over $43 million to Lori. We flash back to the moment when Lori found Rue working at a smoke shop years back, and this being the beginning of when Rue became a drug mule for Lori for the last few years. We see Rue doing a few runs where she has to swallow a bowl of drugs concealed in many balloons, which could actually lead to death if one of those balloons broke open inside someone, but after a few runs, she decided she needed help, and that comes in the form of Faye, who we remember from Season 2. Now, for those that don't remember, her boyfriend was Custer, who was the reason Ashtray and Fezco were raided in Season 2, and she tried to warn them, but obviously we remember it was too late. But now she and Rue are essentially human suitcases swallowing balloons of drugs to clear customs. Now look, the van humor of seeing them crossing the border and the dog peeing and their stomach having issues, it was some much needed comic relief over this serious situation. But then we take this sharp turn into what I like to call what the hell did I just watch category. We see Rue returning back to Lori's house and she's about to shit her pants. Meanwhile, we see Faye already has done so, and we see a dog coming up behind her and licking the soil from her butt. Yeah, I think we can all agree that we did not need to see that. Now, after the raid, we learn that Lori left her old operations behind and went into business with her cousin Harley and his son Wayne. As we can see, as long as business continues to thrive and they haven't gotten caught, Rue, who has become their best mule with the help of Faye, they are a part of this possibly inbred, weird, happy little drug-dealing family, and I'm sure nothing bad will happen to them. Now, while at the dinner table, we get some foreshadowing for later in this episode. We see Rue sees a scene on television that I couldn't make out what movie or show it came from, but it's essentially a man buried in the dirt with his head sticking out, and then we get this shot of a rat crawling underneath the table. Now, the man with his head sticking out of the dirt is seen in a much different context later on in this episode with Alamo, but what about this rat? To me, the rat could represent or symbolize her or someone at this table becoming a rat and snitching and destroying this whole operation from the inside at some point this season. Now the question is, will it be Rue or Faye or someone else at this table? Now, later that night, it appears that Faye and Wayne have a little romantic thing going on, as Faye tells Rue that Wayne is looking to get out of the game and move into the avocado business, and he stashed all his money and important items in his safe. Now, after she said that, you can literally see the light bulb go off above Rue's head. Now, we don't hear any more about the safe for the rest of this episode, but mark my words, Rue and Faye are absolutely going to target that safe by the end of the season at some point. Now, if you have been following a lot of the stuff behind the scenes, you know that there's been a lot of unfortunate and unexpected things that have happened. Now, one of the more recent behind the scenes dramas, it deals with Labyrinth, who is the show's main composer, who left the show and removed his music entirely from this particular season. I bring this up because very early on this episode, and honestly throughout this episode, I personally felt the absence of his music because I'm such a big fan of his music. Number one, I have both seasons downloaded on my phone. I listen to it pretty frequently. Like, the score for both seasons of the show is nothing short of spectacular. So going back to his absence and the music choices overall, yes, Hans Zimmer is a part of the score this season, and Hans Zimmer to me is the GOAT. He's the greatest film composer of all time, in my opinion. But when it comes to Lab not having his hands in this show and in this episode in particular, I feel like his music and his score is a character within itself, and to me, it was sorely missed in this premiere episode. Now, meanwhile, on a lighter note, we see Rue has a side hustle to make up for her millions of dollars in debt by being an Uber driver. As she says that she gets to drive around some interesting people, which I'm pretty sure we're going to eventually see her maybe driving one of the other characters at some point, and that's how our storylines will probably inevitably cross with Rue and Jules and Maddie and all the different characters that aren't in scenes together in this episode. But we see her driving this Batman impersonator to meet up with other members of the Justice League and the Bat family. Now, it's nice to see that Lexi are still friends and Rue sometimes stays over. But we can see that Rue still lies to her best friend, as she says that she was recently in Arizona visiting her little sister Gia. Now, for those who do not know, Storm Reed has already been confirmed to not appear in this season. Unfortunately, we will be seeing Rue's mom again at some point, but again, we won't be seeing Gia this season. Now, Lexi is still responsible, she's still a caring friend, and she wants Rue to do good and be in a good place in her life, and she's concerned about Rue's future with her job. Now, Rue shares her experience with the Miller family and how peaceful their lives seem without technology or internet, as Lexi shares her 2 cents about this religious family and them being Christians, which she says makes them very judgmental. Now, I found that to be very funny because it's almost like the pot calling the kettle black, as Lexi is literally judging them about their faith. Now, this religious curiosity from Rue's spiritual exploration that we've seen all the way back in season 1 definitely feels like it will be a very important thread and a backbone of this character's arc throughout this new season. Now, it's here that we actually get a reference to Fez, as Rue tells Lexi that she should call him. We find out that he's serving 30 years after the events of the shootout in the raid in season 2. Now, we all know the tragic real-life loss of Angus Cloud, so we obviously know he won't be appearing on screen, but the show seems to want to keep him alive within the narrative. To me, Lexi's hesitancy to call him seems to come from a place of having seen enough of the drug world to know what it does to people, and she's traumatized by being dragged back into that toxic orbit. So my question is, will she actually make the call? I'm very interested to see how they handle his absence in this season and how this story progresses moving forward. Now, sticking with Lexi, we see she's working in Hollywood on a nighttime soap as an assistant. Her boss, played by Sharon Stone, goes by the name of Patty Lance, and she is an industry legend, and it is clear which side of the political spectrum she's on and her production team is on as well, as Lexi feels right at home. Now, we do get another quick scene with Lexi later on this episode, but since we're talking about her, what can we expect from Lexi this season? Now, after her polarizing meta disaster that was the Oklahoma play in season 2, 2, I'm predicting we'll see Lexi trying to exert more creative control, pushing for influence, and probably not receiving the credit that she believes that she deserves. Plus, there's a hint later on this episode of a potential romance with a young celebrity in the mix, which may tie into her sister Cassie and Maddie getting involved as well. So I can overall definitely see Lexi definitely trying to climb that ladder within the industry, but the question is, what will she be willing to sacrifice to find her way on top? Now, speaking of Cassie, as Rue says, we find her living in a right-wing suburban bubble, and we can see that she is fully committed to the bit. She is literally pretending to be a puppy dog, shaking her ass on top of a doggy house, eating and drinking out of a bowl, crawling around, letting her housekeeper record her, all to become an influencer. Meanwhile, in comes Nate to find his soon-to-be wife and housemaid making puppy dog content as he's at work all day and comes home to find her doing this. We watch him snap his fingers to have the maid go back to work, and we can just basically see that he's forcing Cassie, or at least in my eyes, he wants her to basically be his trophy wife. But we can clearly see this is an ongoing argument between them as he's afraid of being looked at as a joke and that her content could be affecting his job if any one of his investors find one of her videos and basically thinks that she's a prostitute. Now we watch as Nate plays along with her content as a dog as she crawls towards him and tells her that he's got money, there's no reason for her to work and become an influencer. This whole scene was a very interesting reminder of their very unhealthy relationship. As we remember and as we can see now, it's still toxic. Nothing has changed between the two. There seems to also be some money issues that Nate hasn't shared with his fiance because he hasn't made the remodels to the living room and other places in the house, claims that he's just investing in his business. Again, to me, their relationship has and will always be a show. They think that they're in love with each other, but instead they love the idea of others thinking they're this perfect couple from the outside, but inside, again, I think it's just all a show. Now, was it me or did Sam Levinson fold in Sydney Sweeney's real-world persona and political discord with her being called a right-winger? Meanwhile, we have Nate being Nate, of course, but actor Jacob Elordi is also channeling his best Wuthering Heights energy. When we see him grabbing Cassie's leash and calling her a good dog, was it me or for all those that seen Wuthering Heights, was he giving off some Heathcliff energy and kind of those levels of manipulation of what he did with Isabella? Now, going back to what they've been up to, we see Nate has been taking over his father's business, and Rue says that business hasn't been easy for him, especially working in Southern California as he prepares for their big up-and-coming wedding. Now, we can see behind the scenes that Nate's business is probably failing. He's faking construction workers to impress an investor for this Sun Settlers development project, and Nate assures things are going smoothly. Now, I think it's a safe bet to assume that this investment project will probably blow up and go to shit, and it wouldn't surprise me if Cassie's videos plays a part into that. Now, back with Cassie, who also puts on her own show, we see her with her neighbor talking about Nate's viewpoint on her posting online.
If Fred ever tried to tell me what I could and could not post on social media, I'd castrate him.
He just doesn't get the online world. I mean, people make so much money using it.
The conversation adds more to the idea that there may be some money issues they're afraid to address with one another, as Cassie wants the most expensive wedding to happen and doesn't want money to be an issue. And here's where she brings up how much money she wants to have and how she can make it fast if she goes on OnlyFans.
Are you really considering this?
I mean, I wasn't. Not until Nate started nickel and diming me.
So what would you be posting?
I don't know. Probably the same stuff that I post on Instagram.
So why would people pay for it?
The conversation about OnlyFans being pornography is brought up, but we see Cassie sees it more as an opportunity to create a deeper connection with her fans for about $50, and they'll get a personalized video saying good morning to them, and it'll be like they're being closer to her and making them think that they're special to her. Now, to be fair, when I first became aware of the popularity of OnlyFans, I also thought of it more of like a modern version of online porn, which, no judgment to anyone that's on OnlyFans, and it is very true that there are many other things you could do on the platform, and it's not just about adult content, but as far as the plot is concerned, it wouldn't surprise me if Cassie does end up showcasing more adult material and that causing a bigger problem between her and Nate. To me, it seems pretty apparent that she is desperate for this wedding and to look a certain way, and she's starting to treat her life like a product to be sold. Now, back with Lexi and Rue, we get our only reference to another lead character of the show who actually doesn't appear in this premiere episode. Lexi tells Rue that she had heard from Maddie, which we cut to that scene of Maddie telling her that Jules is a sugar baby.
A sugar baby?
A hooker.
But there's a difference, right? Sugar babies don't have to have sex.
That's like hiring a chef who doesn't cook.
Again, we don't see Jules in this episode, but it wouldn't surprise me if she's maybe working with a new character that we meet later on. Now, speaking of Maddie, who is one of my favorite characters of the show, we see that she also works in the industry as a manager who represents influencers and some actors, including an actor by the name of Dylan Reed. Now, Dylan is this heartthrob known for his work on LA Nights, and someone Lexi seems to have a crush on, despite him thinking that her name is Lisa after giving a great note to one of his scenes on his show. Again, this Dylan Reed and Lexi could be a romantic subplot, and Lexi giving notes to the projects and maybe again not getting the credit that she believes she deserves might be an issue at some point later this season. Now, back to my girl Maddie. We see her working on the red carpet, answering phones at the management company she works for, and despite it not being the most glamorous job and being paid as little as $900 a night, she's great at her job, especially talking to the talent and convincing them to do impress. Now, we can see Maddie lives in like this basement situation of an apartment, and again making less than $900 a night, which isn't a bad amount of money. I wish I could make $900 a day, but neither here nor there. $900 living in LA, living in Hollywood isn't really that great of money. It's kind of crazy to think about Maddie and Cassie and thinking about them earlier in the seasons, right? Seeing Cassie now chasing this high-end lifestyle and wanting to have this big expensive wedding, while Maddie is literally hustling for rent. Now, based on the trailer and also based on little tidbits in this episode, we know that Maddie will be helping out Cassie with her content sooner rather than later. Now, the question is, will they be switching positions by the end of this season? Look, whatever happens between Cassie and Maddie and of course Nate, I am here for all the chaos and drama.
Don't worry. This is just the beginning.
But back with Rue, we find her at Frank's diner meeting with Ali, talking about giving her life over to God.
That's hard.
Why?
Because how am I supposed to give my life and will over to the care of God?
Easy. You believe in something greater than yourself. That something is God. God is good. That is that.
I've never been into the whole believing in God thing,
This conversation and just this scene right here felt the most like season 1 and 2 to me, and felt like that special episode before we got season 2, as they're discussing the Bible and the technicalities of how gay people, or in particularly gay men, and butt sex was called out for being wrong in the Bible. There's so many misinterpretations and mistranslations all about the Bible, but at the end of the day, it comes down to having faith or not, and Rue is being sold.
Okay, I'm sold. I'm making the decision, God be my witness, that I'm going to read the Bible, okay? And when I do, I'm going to read every word as absolute fact.
God damn, you ain't got to be so extreme about it.
No, Ali, you said it yourself. Either you believe or you don't believe.
We all know that this has been a long time coming, that Rue's always trying to find something to be addicted to, something to get her mind off of falling into relapse and get into drugs again. So it doesn't surprise me that she's now leaning more into religion, as we see her listening to an audiobook about the Bible while in the middle of doing an Uber, which was just a hilarious scene how all that played out. Now, going back to Ali, huge Coleman D'Amico fan, huge fan of Ali the character, and I love that he's still in Rue's life, even though he's probably not aware of what her working relationship is with Lori and how she's dealing with all the drug stuff and being a mule. But putting that aside for a second, as we all know since the beginning of the show, all of these actors have become like mega stars and household names, and Coleman Domingo is one of those household names. He has become one of my favorite actors. He's been doing a lot of great stuff on not only television but also movies, so I do hope that we do get to spend more time with his character this season, because if I'm not mistaken, I believe the credits said that he was one of the producers of the season, so I am very excited to learn more about Ali. We learned a little bit about him in that special back before episode or season 2 began. So hope we get more Ali, hope we get more scenes between Ali and his family and obviously Rue, and I just want more Coleman Domingo because he's one of my favorite actors. Now we cut to the next morning at Lori's and we get to see their drug operation under this horse stable as Wayne needs Rue to do a drop off with a big buyer. Now we get some more foreshadowing here as Wayne is making Faye chicken as a romantic gesture for dinner, and it's just going to be them two as we see him removing this chicken's head and blood spills onto his shoes as he looks at Rue. To me, this is just more signs of Rue and images of heads, which ties into what we're going to see by the end of this episode. Now, it's also important to point out that maybe Faye or even Wayne decided to have Rue drop off the package. We saw that Faye was actually the one that made the drugs that was given to Rue. Knowing what happens later, was it intentional on any of those characters' part to have Rue be the one to drop off the drugs and ultimately being blamed for what ends up happening? Now, we see Rue arrives to this big buyer's house and he goes by the name of Alamo, but Rue being Rue, she has to go inside to use the restroom and she's given instructions by this character by the name of Bishop not to look at anyone, not to touch anything, and just come in and out. But of course, we all know that Rue, again, being Rue, she's looking around and not just going straight to the bathroom, and she's looking at this huge house as she comes across a girl in the bathroom who needed help with putting on her bra or her bikini after getting her boobs done, and we can see that Rue couldn't be happier to help. Now, after telling Rue to just go to the bathroom and come back, we see Alamo's, I guess he's his bodyguard or his muscle, again by the name of Bishop, as he finds her dancing with the other girls. Bishop grabs her and is about to toss her out until Alamo sees her and asks for him to bring her to him, despite being told that she works for Elordi.
You walk up into my house, dance with my girls, and you don't even introduce yourself.
Now we watch them share a drink and talk about his line of work of being in the business of women's majestic power between their legs. Now, to be more professional, I would imagine that his LinkedIn profile says that he is the owner of 5 of the dirtiest strip clubs in California, but also something tells me that he's also probably selling these women at the same time. And again, I wouldn't be surprised if we find out if Jules is a sugar baby, she's probably a part of his business in some way, but I also wouldn't be surprised if he might be involved in possibly trafficking these women as well. Now, Rue takes this opportunity to pitch her dream job as working in clubs, troubleshooting, and also causing a little bit of trouble at the same time. Now, right now, it seems like Rue wants to switch one evil for another evil, and she wants to get from under Elordi and works for Alamo, but also want to point out, it was so cool to see other members of Alamo's crew, including young actor Asante Black, who you all might remember, at least the last time I saw him was on one of the best miniseries of all time with When They See Us, but also for my football fans out there, we see future Hall of Famer Marshawn Lynch. So 2 actors and 2 characters that I'm really interested to see how they play into their story as well. Meanwhile, needing a new career path of their own, we cut back to Cassie as we see her looking, or should I say stalking, Maddie's Instagram, and we see her with other celebrities, and I think this is the point where we're seeing Cassie's getting the idea that maybe Maddie could help her with her plans of becoming internet famous as well. Now, at their candlelight dinner, Cassie brings up their wedding flowers, which is going to cost around $50,000, which is crazy. And Nate, this is the only time I probably will ever agree with him. He thinks this is a crazy idea to have that amount of money worth of flowers. But Cassie got a solution, and that is she wants to pay for them for herself. Now, she shares her idea of joining OnlyFans, and he immediately jumps on her for wanting to do porn for flower arrangements, and they share a bit of a laugh. It's here we watch as Cassie gaslights Nate as she looks at him and tells Nate that she will do whatever she needs to do to get those flowers because she didn't wait her whole life to have a ghetto wedding. Now, we watch Cassie use a very old Jedi mind trick by money shaming Nate by saying that maybe they don't need to have a wedding because he can't afford it, which clearly triggers him into talking about his job and what he's doing. But we ultimately see Nate caves into the idea of OnlyFans, and the only thing he wants is to make sure that she doesn't show her boobs and her face at the same time. Now, talk about foreshadowing, we cut from this scene to this scene. Back at Alamo's, one of his girls dies because of the drugs from Lori's, which was laced with fentanyl. Again, was the intention on Lori's part Wayne or Faye, or was it just a coincidence that this girl died at this party? Now, speaking of coincidences, again, going back to what I talked about foreshadowing, we go from Cassie seamlessly getting the okay to doing OnlyFans to immediately cutting to a face of a dead girl. So, was the show just foreshadowing that Cassie will end up dead at some point this season? Rue now in Alamo's office, and clearly he's pissed to what happened to one of his girls, and he thinks that Lori is sabotaging his operations. Rue goes on to share her origin story between her and Lori, dating all the way back to high school, and meeting Alamo is maybe a sign from God. But looks more like she is getting a sign from the devil to work with Alamo, who wants to test Rue's faith, and he takes her outside.
Do you believe in God?
Yes, sir.
Well, let's see if he believes in you.
He places an apple, which isn't a coincidence considering all the religious undertones and symbolism within this episode. We all remember the story of Adam and Eve, but more importantly, the forbidden fruit. The apple being something that was given to Rue, and that being the representation of the devil, and that being Alamo. As he places the apple on top of her head, and with his golden gun, and remember all the head references from the movie earlier on in the episode, the chicken getting his head ripped off, well, now we see Rue will have to keep her head on at the moment, leaving it all up into God's hands, but also to Alamo's aim. All she had to do was a simple drop off of drugs and leave, but Rue now finds herself with an apple on her head, the forbidden fruit on her head, and some stranger about to shoot it off, and luckily for her, she gets a blessing, or maybe a curse from the universe, as he clears her head only to shoot the apple, and Rue lives and laughs in joy, thinking that this was some divine intervention, but in my eyes, in reality, she just went from one evil person to another, as we end the first episode of Euphoria for the first time in 4 years. Look, after watching that last scene, and after watching this, obviously, this entire episode, it's been 4 years later. These characters are older now, right? But the question is, are these characters any wiser? Based on this season opener, I would say that some of them, including Rue, is just more dangerous. Now, I would imagine this isn't the last time that we've seen Alamo. I bet that he'll want revenge on Lori, so going back to that rat under the table, I could see Alamo wanting Rue to disrupt Lori and Harley's business, and putting Rue being caught between a rock and a hard place like we saw her at the start of this episode. Now, let's talk about Rue. I love Rue despite her shortcomings, beside her addictive ways, despite the terrible decisions she's made. I'm a big fan of the character. I love Zendaya's role. Her performance is incredible. But when it comes to Rue making it out of this season alive, I don't think that it's a likely chance that she's going to survive. And at the same time, I am very curious on who she's going to take down with her. Again, I don't want to leave out what I talked about earlier. Did Lori, or probably not Lori because she wants her money back, but probably Wayne or Faye, did they purposefully send Rue to Alamo's knowing that the drugs were going to be laced with fentanyl and someone could die? So should we be concerned about Wayne? I think so. But also, what about Faye? Let me know what you all think in the comments below. Now, I've shared my thoughts about the other characters and where they can go this season throughout this breakdown, but right now, I am probably, as far as these plots that we've gotten so far, and of course we didn't see Jules, but right now, the most interesting plot to me is Rue, followed by what's going on with Cassie and Nate, and then followed by Maddie and Lexi. But let me know which order of the plots are you most excited for, and which one from this first episode caught your attention the most. Right now, characters seem to be spread from each other, but I can see them eventually coming together. Rue working with Alamo maybe working or having Jules work for her. We of course know the connection between Lexi and Maddie working in the industry. We know that Lexi is a sister of Cassie. Cassie wants to get famous. She's going to work with Maddie, and Nate's going to get involved. So all these stories right now seem so far apart, but eventually I'll see them coming together sooner rather than later. So the $1 million question after this first episode, and after 4 years without an episode of Euphoria, did this feel like Euphoria of old? In my opinion, no, but I think that's the point. Of course, like in real life, when you go from being a teenager into adulthood, things aren't supposed to feel or look the same from when you were younger. Now, of course, from season 1 to 2, there was a change in the look and the tone of those 2 seasons, but as far as this episode go, of course, we have 7 other episodes to compare it to, but so far, this episode stylistically, musically, aesthetically, didn't quite feel like Euphoria to me, but I'm still very interested to see it through to the very end because regardless of all the drama behind the scenes, I am a fan of these actors, most of these actors. I've been a fan of the show since the very beginning, so I will be discussing this every single week because I am, again, a fan of this series. With that being said, this will conclude my breakdown of Euphoria Season 3, Episode 1. Now, the big question is, what did you all think of this premiere episode? I'm talking to all my fans of the show, but also all the haters of the show. Would you all like, not like? Which plot are you most interested in? What thoughts, theories, predictions do you all have for the weeks ahead? And do you think this will be like the old days of Euphoria, or will it be something new? And is that something new going to be good or bad? Thank you all for watching or listening to this week's breakdown. If you all have made it to this point in the breakdown, I appreciate you. You all are the real ones. You're the real MVPs. If you are still here, put in the comments right now, hashtag the drama is back. Now, if you all are watching this breakdown on YouTube, I appreciate you. Please consider hitting that like button. Also, hype up this video. I want this video to get to new viewers because, again, I want to talk about this. I want to talk about it with you all, but everyone else that loves talking about this show. So hit the hype button, hit the share button. Also, share your thoughts again about this episode in the comments below. And consider sticking around by subscribing to the channel today. If you are listening to this via podcast, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you all get your podcasts from, I appreciate all my podcast listeners out there. Do me a favor, leave your thoughts in the comments, but also consider following the podcast where we're talking Euphoria, The Boys, Invincible, and so much more. So follow the podcast, and I would love if you all can leave me a 5-star review. Alrighty, y'all. Thank you again for watching or listening. We will be back next week to talk about episode 2. But in the meantime, don't forget, you all are awesome. Stay safe, and I'll catch you all on the next breakdown.